This podcast summarizes in 5 minutes the 2-hour-long Stephen Bartlett podcast with Konstantin Kisin, Professor Scott Galloway, and Daniel Priestley, posted by The Diary of a CEO on 23 January 2025. In this interview, they discussed a wide range of topics, from the reaction against wokeness to the potential impact of the return to power of President Trump. Let's start with a brief introduction about the guests. Konstantin Kisin is a political and social commentator known for discussing some of society's most controversial topics. Professor Scott Galloway is a renowned professor and business analyst who publicly endorsed Kamala Harris, offers sharp, data-driven critiques of Trump's policies and their impact on democracy and the economy. Daniel Priestley is an entrepreneur and strategist, examines how Trump's election could reshape the business landscape, addressing the challenges and opportunities for industries adapting to new policies. Now let's talk about the key takeaways from the podcast. Takeaway 1. The world is in a state of transition. The podcast discusses the ongoing social, cultural, and economic changes taking place globally, with the U.S. playing a significant role in these shifts. The guests highlight the rise of right-wing populism, the decline of Western dominance, and the increasing influence of China and other emerging powers. Takeaway 2. Reaction against wokeness. The podcast explores the growing backlash against what is perceived as excessive focus on social justice issues, particularly in the U.S. This is seen as a contributing factor to the rise of right-wing populism and the decline of traditional political parties. Concerns over cancel culture, a focus on identity politics, and a backlash against progressive policies are discussed. Takeaway 3. Economic decline in the UK. The podcast discusses the economic challenges facing the UK, including high taxation, a declining business ecosystem, and an exodus of millionaires. The guests express concerns about the country's future prosperity and the potential for a social and political crisis. Takeaway 4. The allure of the U.S. The podcast highlights the attractiveness of the U.S. for entrepreneurs and businesses due to lower tax rates, a more business-friendly regulations, and greater economic dynamism, which is seen as a contributing factor to the decline of the UK's business sector. Takeaway 5. The potential impact of the return to power of President Trump. The guests discuss the potential implications of the return to power of the former U.S. president, including economic nationalism, social division, and international instability. Takeaway 6. The rise of right-wing populism. The podcast explores the growing influence of right-wing populism globally, citing economic inequality, cultural change, and the decline of traditional political parties as contributing factors. Takeaway 7. The importance of free speech. The podcast debates the role of free speech in society, with Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter being a key point of discussion. The guests discuss the importance of free speech for a healthy democracy while acknowledging concerns about the abuse of free speech and the role of social media platforms. Takeaway 8. The dangers of online echo chambers. The podcast discusses the negative impact of online echo chambers, where individuals are primarily exposed to information that confirms their existing beliefs. This can lead to radicalization, extremism, and social polarization due to filter bubbles and algorithmic bias. Takeaway 9. The importance of addressing loneliness. The podcast highlights the growing problem of loneliness, particularly among young men, and its potential impact on mental health and societal well-being. The guests discuss the need for community-based solutions to address loneliness as a public health crisis. Takeaway 10. The need for economic prosperity. The podcast emphasizes the importance of economic prosperity for individual well-being and societal stability. The guests argue that policies should prioritize economic growth and job creation while ensuring inclusive growth and promoting economic opportunity for all members of society. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this summary of the Stephen Bartlett podcast with Konstantin Kisin, Professor Scott Galloway, and Daniel Priestley informative. If you're interested in learning more about these topics, I encourage you to watch the full podcast on YouTube.